Hey Ty, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited that we get to do this. I've been following you for a while and love what you're doing with your podcast.
I appreciate it.
Well, it's something that when I found you and I saw what you were doing with Out on the Row, it really resonated with me because my background is in pipeline. So it's interesting kind of seeing all of that come to life and what you're doing for that part of the industry, really capturing those stories.
Well, when we started the whole podcast, it was just in my pickup up in Kansas, and we didn't really think it was going to be anything. It was just me and a buddy of mine, Dalton Hendricks, just fiddling around. And then when I posted the first episode, it kind of took off, I guess it was the second episode we recorded, because we recorded like one every day at the beginning. We was releasing them just boom, boom, boom. Well, I guess it was like the second or third, maybe the one I done with Dalton and Hagen that kind of took off a little bit, and I was like, man, maybe we did catch something here. Which, there's a lot of I wouldn't. Let me see the word I want to use here. There's a lot of mysterious. I don't know if that's the word either. But anyways, there's a lot of mystery with the pipeline, with
Yeah.
welders, and it has some stigmas to it. So I kind of wanted to open it up for a lot of people. You had the guys doing their stuff on TikTok, but you didn't really know that person behind the welding hood. You just knew
Hmm.
the persona that they put on the internet.
Right.
Um, Which, after meeting a bunch of them, they're the same guys, day in and day out, whether they're goofy, whether they're super serious about their profession, whatever. They've all been that same person. It's just having them conversations, getting somebody to open up and talk about their life,
Right.
what got them started into it and stuff. I wanted to encapsulate them stories and give them to the world.
Yeah.
It's a big thing.
Absolutely. I think demystifying all of that, and because that's a lot of what I've heard about, like with my show, like having different people come on from different parts of the industry, you're really able to get a different perspective.
For
It's
sure.
not just what like the narrative is shared like on mass media about the industry, or like you said, like you just see personalities or you see guys making welds on TikTok, but to really understand the lifestyle. Because I mean, with pipeline, a lot of it is, your family did pipeline, and so
Right.
welders, it's generational work.
Right.
Or and so like hearing about like how they got into the industry and how you guys travel the way that you do and manage it all. There's a lot that goes into
It's
it.
a lot. Like I didn't have any welders in my family or any pipeliners in general that I know of. So it kind of, I don't know, it's kind of an oddball thing because my dad was a farmer and my mom worked for the co-op and stuff. So it just, I don't know.
How'd you get into it?
I moved to Texas in 2011. I was already kind of welding, here and there in the plants and kind of doing stuff like that. But a buddy of mine convinced me to move to Texas in 2011. Well, that was kind of when I started to first see the rig trucks and all that stuff, and I was interested in what they had going on. Well, um, but I still didn't do anything with the pipeline until 2014 was the first time I went on a helper job. And I just kind of got into it. I wanted to be a pipeline welder because of the big, you can build the big reputation and you can have the fancy truck, and kind of how I got into it. And then as my career's progressed, it's like I still like to have the fancy trucks and all that stuff, but it's more of a, and my kids don't really, they get to live their lives how they want to live them. But I think the biggest thing was once I taught the first helper how to be a welder, it kind of just resonated in something I like to do. So,
Hmm.
I don't know how many, 6 or 7 now that are all welders. So it's kind of, I got a new helper now that'll be with me for the next year. And so it kind of, I guess it's what got me going on as far as what got me to stick it out, especially after I'll talk about my divorce and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was kind of, it was different because they was on the road with me, then they went home, and it kind of,
That
all
would
that
be a hard
transpired.
adjustment.
But it's worked out. I started the podcast. That thing's taken off pretty well. So
Well, that seems like an interesting venture to get into because you can do so much with podcasting, but there's a lot of work that goes into it, and it seems like it's just a continuous evolution, like learning how to work with the equipment and editing and things like that.
yeah,
And
especially for a guy that didn't even take computer class in high school.
but it seems like you
We
caught on to it.
Well, it's a lot of help. Like I know you had Nate on here. He's got a brother that I've talked to a few times, and talking to Nate and talking to some of the guys that's used microphones on TikTok and stuff like that. And speaking to you, it's just it's putting yourself out there to to try to learn something. I
Yeah.
mean, it's the same thing when you go to welding. You know, you learn from all these different welders and foremans and superintendents. You learn from all these people. Even helpers have taught me things before. It's, you know, you just try to evolve with the information you're given all the time. I would think
Yeah.
that may not be the best terminology,
No,
but it
I
works.
agree with that because it's to be able to just evolve through it. Otherwise, you're never going to start
Right.
because you're not ever going to have that like whole package at once. And I mean, a lot of it's the same as being a welder. Like you have to learn the different processes and the different steps, and then to actually weld good enough to be able to weld consistently for work and to
Sure.
pass tests and go on different jobs. And you learn as you go along.
Right. The I would say the hardest part is just finding the time to record. You know, because I record other welders or people in that pipeline. I mean, people don't want to work 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, and then come home and sit on, a computer
Right.
for an hour. I mean, I've had a lot of guys sit on there for 2 or 3 hours. You know, I kind
Mm-hmm.
of let my conversations just go how they go till I can cut them off. But that is scheduling part of it's what I think a lot of people don't understand with the way my podcasts work is just scheduling and everything going right that day for them and me. And then I think that's the toughest part about being consistent with
Yeah.
mine.
Mm-hmm.
Which I have a lot. I have a lot of podcasts stored that this year will make it a lot easier. Which is something I learned from a buddy of mine. He he told me, he's like, well, can you not just knock a bunch of them out real quick and then have them stored, then you can just release them.
Mm-hmm.
Now that plan it's going great. To do it that way. I think pretty sure that come from Nate too. But me and him talked about doing that. So I knocked out like three. I guess that was Memorial Day. That's the first. Was that like in May?
Yes.
Memorial.
That's
Okay, so it was Memorial Day. I knocked out three in one day, which was pretty efficient.
extremely. And that's a goal of mine, and I agree because I when I first started I would record every week. It was one episode every time I went to the studio, and that worked great. But if someone canceled or anything changes and it throws your schedule off and you don't have anything reserved,
Yeah.
I mean, especially for me, because I have so many people that advertise on the show and I have a schedule that I've created. I hold myself to that standard. Like, nobody's calling me wanting to know when the episode's coming out,
Right.
but because that's what I've put out there, I want to be consistent with what I'm
Right.
delivering.
Well, to succeed at anything, you need to be consistent.
Yes.
I'm fortunate enough with my podcast. I don't. People are so used to the inconsistency that they just know that
You do
that's what it
drop,
is.
like, when you do, like, whenever. Like,
Whatever. I don't have a set time period. I might drop it on a Monday. It might be Wednesday at noon. It might be Sunday. I don't know.
yeah.
My buddy Brian and Andrew that do the Iron Sights podcast, they're real efficient because they record like 4 or 5 episodes on Sunday. They'll start at like 10 a.m. on Sunday and record for 4 or 5 hours on Sunday. Then they do their editing that afternoon, and then they
Oh,
start
I
dropping
love
them.
that.
And
That's
it works.
cool.
And it works extremely efficient for them, which they keep their podcast a lot like yours. 35 or 30 to an hour long. Stuff
Hmm.
like that. Where I just let mine go until the
Well, and because I listen to a lot of different podcasts, of course, Joe Rogan, like almost all of his episodes are 2.5 hours to three
hmm
hours long, and I will listen to it. It might take me a couple days to
right,
get through one, and I can see the attraction of doing that because you talk about so many things, like you're really spending time together. But for me, because I'm trying to hit so many different parts of the industry, that could not
right,
happen. It wouldn't be efficient, and it's just way too much content. And when you're talking to someone about a specific part of the industry or the lifestyle of it, I couldn't imagine my show running that long.
right.
45 minutes to 60 minutes has usually been the sweet spot. Um, Less than that, it's kind of rushing it, but more than that, then we're talking about a lot of other
Right.
things. And so I'm trying to get as much information about the industry out as possible and really representing it, so that I'm just like more, and I'm a little bit more structured. Whereas like
Oh yeah,
you
for
free
sure.
flow a
Right.
lot, and so does Rogan, and a lot of those guys.
Yeah.
And so like for me, it's like I have it in my head, kind of how the conversation will go, and I keep the time that way. And so it kind of worked out that
Yeah.
like that was the time frame, because I think the longest I've done is like an hour and 20 minutes, and that felt like
Eternity.
forever.
Yeah.
Like going back through all that
And me and
content.
Hunter Wilson done one. I think it was like 2 hours and 45 minutes, which we started late in the afternoon, and it just there's so much information that you can get out of somebody, and Hunter's a teacher, so
Mm,
his ability to talk is unmatched. You know, like if you
right.
do one with Austin Dupree's, he's big on TikTok. Like he's just not a conversationalist.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like doing one with Gerald W. It the conversation rolled. Like we didn't just talk about welding. We talked about his time overseas. You know, there was a lot. You know, that
Mm-hmm.
went in with him, um, which is a podcast I need to get out. I said I was going to get some out this week. I'm still working on it.
Yeah, you
So
told me you were going to drop some on the first.
I know, and some of them are edited, but the first was a long day for me because the 31st was a long evening. But
Oh, yeah,
because
I believe
I
that.
live an unorthodox lifestyle, I would
You
say.
do, and I mean, of course, I grew up around pipeline, so I know the life, and I know that it's very inconsistent. And so the way you put your podcast episodes out, it's really aligned with the lifestyle of the pipeliner,
True.
because you could be on a pipeline job for 3 months, and that's your consistent schedule for those 3 months.
Hmm.
And whether you're out of state, you're working 6 10s or 7 12s, like that will determine your lifestyle at that time.
For sure.
And then it can totally change when you get those 2 checks and you head home,
Yep.
and you might be off for an indefinite amount of time, or you may go straight to the next job, but there's no there's no consistency with that.
I've been pretty before the podcast was even a thing. Yeah, I've been pretty consistent. It's a blessing because my name and reputation, I guess, has kind of reached a point to where my inconsistency in work don't really happen anymore. Like I come off a job, most of them already got another job planned out. Uh, but I mean, maybe a week and maybe a month. It could be, you know,
Hmm.
it could happen a day before you think it's going to. There's like you could drive all the way to a job and test out, and somebody get hit with the track code that afternoon, and
Yeah,
the job would be done. You know, or
I
they
have
can rip
seen that.
permits from jobs. You know,
Hmm.
I was driving to a job in Louisiana one time, and they called and said, "Hey, they pulled the permits,"
Yeah,
and it was a done deal.
I've definitely
You
seen
know,
all of that.
so
And I mean, for you guys even more so, and I know I've talked about this with Juan and Nate as well when they came on. Like, you go to a job and you still have to test.
oh yeah,
You might already have papers for that gas company, if you're fortunate enough, but
hmm,
a lot of times you're going to have to test.
oh yeah. Well, even anymore, they got it to where it's job specifics, what they call it.
Oh,
So
okay.
like I had one oak papers, and still I've tested for them 3 times this year. You know,
Mm,
because I don't understand why they do it that way. It seems like a waste of money, but it's their money, and they got a certain dollar amount that gas companies want to spend a certain dollar amount so they can, they can make a bigger budget for the next year, whatever the plan is for their stuff. But I don't know a whole lot on that, but I know that everything revolves around money.
yeah,
So I don't know why they test welders every time. It's not like I worked for you in February and I forgot how to weld by January,
right.
or December. It's or even even there was one oak done a job, and I think it was only like 3 months later, and a bunch of the welders went back to another job, and they made them test for that site. I
Oh,
mean, just
wow.
just how it goes. I mean,
Hmm.
they want a certain kind of quality of welder, and they want a certain kind of quality of work, and they're gonna get it. You know,
Do you get nervous on test days?
nah, not anymore. They can't take my birthday from me. It don't bother me. Sometimes I wouldn't say nervous, more like anxious to get going. Like if I
Yeah,
go to a weld test and they have a safety meeting that morning, like it makes me just chomping at the bits more.
yeah,
You
I
know,
could
like
see
I want
that.
to
Hmm.
go 7 o'clock. I want to be, getting everything cleaned up and getting ready to take the test. I don't want to go stand in a safety meeting for 30 minutes for a company I may not even work for. I
Right.
don't want to. I don't want to hear all their stuff that morning. But
Yeah.
and there's very few that do it that way. Most time you're set up to go test. You get out of the truck once the inspectors and everybody gets there. They do their little spiel. They get your driver's license, your last four, and you go to test it. Sometimes you can have your coupons and everything cleaned up, and then they get there, give their little spiel. You just go to welding.
Hmm.
That's the times I like. I don't like
Yeah.
I would, maybe the only time I've gotten nervous in the past couple of years. I went and took a welding test down in Louisiana with a welding rod that I've only seen a few times, and I tested with it one time, but it had been years. So I watched YouTube the night before and then went to the test and passed it. So it worked out pretty good.
Oh, okay.
You
Yeah.
know, and well, I talked to some guys too, but that's probably the only. And I was only nervous for the bead part of it. The rest of it was easy.
Hmm.
You know, but
Yeah.
that's what gets you most of the time out the gate. It's not. You can get look like people think that a welding test is just a visual thing, and it is the first part of it. But then they bend and break straps. There's a
Hmm.
lot that goes into that day.
Yeah, because that's where like you really know. It's
Oh
like
yeah,
I mean
for
it
sure.
can look pretty, but if those straps break, I
Yeah,
mean,
I put some pretty tests together that had some dirty straps, so it happens. Because there's a lot of guys like where they're going to take straps from. So you just grind the areas that you know that you're going to take straps from. But if you shorten it up a little bit, maybe you're not as hot as you think you are when you come across, and then when you cut your straps, you take one right on the edge of where you didn't grind at, and it's got a little spot of slag in it. Well, it's a
oh,
no. It's an eighth inch is what you're allowed on a welding test. So if the non-flux end of a 6010, which is a bead rod, your first pass,
hmm,
if it covers it up, you're good to go. But if it doesn't cover it up, well, then you're out some money and
yeah,
on to the next one. So,
yeah.
and there's a bunch of guys that always sit around and say that they've never busted a welding test, and I don't know that I necessarily believe that because even the best welders that I know have busted welding tests.
The
You know,
best welders I know have always admitted that they have busted a
yeah,
welding
because
test, and they say that people who say they haven't are full of shit.
for sure, because you could show up and it don't even have anything to do with your welding ability. The inspector could not like the way your truck's set
Something
up,
could happen, yeah.
or a machine could go down. I mean, or your helper, he could trip over your rod bucket and hit you, and you arc mark the pipe. That's a
Hmm.
busted test.
Yeah,
There's a million ways to bust a welding test outside of your welding
yeah.
abilities.
I think there's just a lot of pride that goes into it. Like, no one wants to
Oh
admit
yeah.
that.
Like people say that I've never caught a repair, this and that. I've repaired out on jobs, and I'm not afraid to admit it. It happens. Sometimes your head's just not in it. It's like
Right.
it's whether it's divorce or a lost person. Sometimes your head's just not in it.
I've seen that happen. It can significantly impact your work if you've
Hmm.
got because it's hard to be on the road. It's hard to be away from your family, or if you have things going on back home, and then you're trying to be out there and make it happen, and sometimes
Sure.
you just can't because it's hard to be inspired when you're way out in the middle of nowhere. You're on the right of way, or you're like really far away, or just
Working for a company you don't like.
working for a company
You
you
know.
don't like. Yeah, I
Or
mean, like
you don't
there's
like the welders you're around, it's very seldom I don't like the welders that I'm around, but there's cases to where you just don't like the people on the job with you.
yeah.
You ain't got your buddies there, or, you know, there's a lot of stipulations that go into it that make it a good job or so forth.
Hmm. No, I agree because I mean I've worked around a lot of welders, and when I was a helper, I've helped several different types of welders, and I mean there were some that were just so great, and I loved it, and I felt like I was learning. But then others where it was just a struggle, or the job, or what we were doing was just impossible, and so I'm like it just like I didn't want to stay with it because there were so many inconsistencies that wore me out.
Right,
It was really exhausting. And I mean there are other things I wanted to do, but I could see that I could see that in the welders, when their head was in it or
right.
when it wasn't, and it would impact the way they worked.
Yeah,
Whether
a lot of people don't understand. That's one thing that I've tried to bring to light with the podcast too. Is what's in these guys' heads when they drive. 1,500 miles, take a welding test, or their wife's at home 6 7 months pregnant.
Mhm.
Or they got kids at home. It's a lot more that goes into it than just because you could be gone for 3 or 4 months. You could be in the UP of Michigan and your family live in Texas, Mississippi,
Mhm.
Louisiana. Well, that's not a drive you're going to make. On a Saturday afternoon and be back Sunday.
No.
It's a little bit different if like working in West Texas, working in Eastern, or Western Louisiana or South Texas or
Mhm.
Oklahoma. If you're from, I'm saying a lot, but if you're from Central Texas, like I'm from Weatherford, Texas, well then it's pretty convenient to work in all them places I
Yeah.
just named off because I can make a trip home on Saturday afternoon and see
Mhm.
my kid for a little bit. There it is again.
Yeah.
I'll try to cut it out.
No, you're fine. I didn't even notice it, but I agree. And because the road can, I mean, the road can tear families apart for different reasons. Like you don't ever get to see them, or they're trying to be on the road with you, and that's hard on kids to do, or
Sure.
it's like that time and space. It's hard. Like I mean, a lot of wives they know the life and they can do it, but there's some that they just can't
Hmm.
handle that separation because it's like you come home, but they know you're going to leave again. So there's always that anticipation
Yep.
that you're going to be gone. So even when you're there, it's like always in your mind that you're going to be leaving.
So I don't know what it is, because when I moved from Alabama to Texas, it was not just about going to weld. It was just like I wanted to go build my own reputation, like outside of my parents, and there's a lot of things that went into it. But so being young, and moving away, I guess it don't affect that part of it. Don't affect me that much.
That's
Like
good.
like I mi- like I'm not saying I don't miss my
Oh,
kids,
of
because I
course,
do,
but you can handle
but I
that.
can handle,
Yeah.
because I got into this. There's Austin the Priest made a post back last year about it. You knew what you signed up for when you got into this.
Yeah.
So nobody wants to see you cry about it. Nobody
No.
wants to hear it,
Yeah.
because automatically the day that you passed your first welding test, you signed up for it, or you went to go be a helper.
Yeah.
So missing your mom, missing your girlfriends, and all that stuff is for the wood burner, because nobody wants to hear it.
Right.
Because we do too. We're just not going to express it out
Mm-hmm.
publicly,
Yeah.
or in a post, or however you want to go about it.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it is what it is.
No, it is, and because it's like you got to take the good with the bad, and that's part of it. You have to accept that's part of it. The long hours, the late nights, like all of that is part of it too. And it's like sometimes you really enjoy it. You enjoy the travel, you enjoy the camaraderie, you enjoy the freedom. There's a lot of freedom with pipeline.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, you definitely get to see a lot of the country, a lot of the world if you work overseas, but it is going to come with the downsides as well,
Oh, for
where
sure.
you're not always at home, and so it's like there's always that conversation about like what you're sacrificing and working on hitches. But it's like what you're saying, it's like we all know what we're signing up for when you get into the oil field or pipeline, anything like that. It's going to require travel and time away from home.
If you're a welder, maybe a helper, but in a welder standpoint, there's not much more fun than showing up to a job with 10 or 15 of your buddies and all of you going to
Oh,
the same
yeah.
campground.
Yeah.
There's
That is it.
Or even if it's just,
That
it
is
could be
the
one or
dream.
two guys that you ain't seen in a while. Like me and my buddy Parker Reese just went to Oklahoma and done a fast little job to finish out the year, and it was 14 days, which we didn't make any money, because you can't make any money in 14 days. But we had the most fun because we hadn't seen each other since probably April, maybe March, April, and it was a blast.
No, that's fun when you get set up like that, and there's something to do, or there's some, or it's like even if there isn't anywhere to go, you guys are just chilling in the trailer park. You have a good time with that, and so it's if you get on a job like that, that can really weigh in also
For sure.
with the.
I mean, like, and my best friend Jansen, I went to a job in Southeast Texas with him, and I was the best man at his wedding. Like, we're good friends, but I just did not want to be there. Like, I mean, it's right after my dad passed away,
Oh yeah.
but didn't want to be there like the whole time. It was just not a good time. So it eventually worked itself out where I wasn't there.
Yeah.
But it's weird how that all plays in, and sometimes you don't even realize it. Things are just happening, and welding is just, it's just a rhythm that you find. Like, you can do it once you get to a certain point, it just, what do they call it? It just happens.
Like it's your muscle memory.
Muscle memory.
And yeah, it's a part of you.
You know what you're looking for, and you just zone in, and then your mind may be a million miles away, and you're just going through the motions of
I've
it.
heard that, like when you get under the hood, you're just in a complete. Well, and I mean, I have before. Like I get that concept because it's a totally different world when you're looking through that lens at a weld. You don't even have a clue what's going on around you, and so you can really kind of process things because you're in a process, like a physical process that's familiar. So you're not really having to think about it that much, and it's consistent. Especially
It's like when you
with
sing a
pipeline.
song and you're not even thinking about the lyrics. You're just singing it.
It's
to be
just so
singing.
natural, and so you can work a lot of things out while you're doing it or not. It's like you
Yeah.
can really like get in a negative space in your head.
For sure, and that drives a bunch of guys to the drinking and the drugs and all that stuff. I think has a lot to do with it. And then the court, missing home and stuff. But I don't know. I think like you said, there's a lot of freedom in the pipeline. So I think that gives people a lot of range to do things that they probably wouldn't normally do
That's true.
in the world.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
like,
a good way to look at it.
whether it's seeing new places or experiencing new things, and it's kind of all out there. And you, for young kids, one thing I've always tried to stress, especially having younger helpers all the time, is like, hey, build your bank account. Do this first. There's plenty of time. Your career is just getting started. You know, you're 24 years old. You're gonna have plenty of time to experience this in the full realm of things. So just work on this part. You know, get you a good truck, get you a good weld machine after you break out. You know, and then you can start living life a little bit. You know, get your stuff paid for,
Mm-hmm.
and so far, I mean, they've all done what they wanted to do. Whether you tell them or not to, they're still going
Yeah.
to do what they want to do. But I think kids get into it so young, and maybe this is their first job away from home, and it just rips them up. You know,
Yeah.
and it is a unforgiving
Yeah.
b word
It,
if you let it be.
it is. No, it really is. Like you've got to have thick skin or get thick skin and figure it out because I mean, I have loved and hated the oil field so many different times. Being on the pipeline, being in West Texas, where I'm like, it can be such a soul crusher, or it can be the most rewarding, amazing thing you've ever done. But you do have to weather the storm, and you have to know how to survive it.
Sure.
You have to be able to just withstand whatever happens because you're so vulnerable in that kind of space where you're away from home, you're just you're on a piece of property, like especially with pipeline because you're on the right of way. The job moves. Like I mean,
Hmm.
I've been on jobs before where like you physically have to move your travel trailer with the job. It's so long, so you're not even in the same spot, and
That's the
so
good
every
jobs.
day you're in this vulnerable space of all you can manage is yourself and your truck and making that weld. And if anything else is falling apart around that, especially with helpers, because a lot of
Hmm.
helpers can be helpless.
Oh,
They don't
for
have a
sure.
place to stay. They're in trouble with something. They got a DUI. They've, got some girl on the road that they're dealing with, baby mama back home, whatever. Like there's all kinds of stories like that that seem especially helpers are especially vulnerable because a lot of them stay with their welders. But
Sure.
for a welder, when you're responsible with your money, you've got your fifth wheel, you've got stability, you can withstand a lot. But I think a lot of them don't make it because they can't reach those different levels because you
Sure.
really have to.
I make it like I worked for this welder that made it like a military process pretty much. Like he drilled into my brain exactly how it had to be all the time. So I like to take a helper and preferably younger guys because then you can drill them that way to where it's only your way of thinking and it helps them out in the long run. They don't see it when they're working for you. They think you're the biggest asshole in the world. But by the time they break out and they get their own helper after a couple weeks, they always call and
Hmm.
say you was right.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if it worked for me, it'll work for anybody. So, and some of them, I mean, I've had helpers quit on me,
Yeah.
and helpers hadn't panned out the way I thought they would. You know, some of them could have been great welders, and they just quit and went home because they couldn't do it, which is fine. But I mean, they have a skill that they could hopefully, but I mean, they
Hmm.
could go work at the house and still make a little living with it. You know, um,
Well, and because that's the thing, like there's a lot of different types of welding, a lot of different ways to navigate a career because some don't want to be away from home
sure.
or would prefer to work in a plant or facility or do fab work. Pipeline is it gets in your blood.
Oh yeah,
It gets in you like you want to go on the next pipeline job because you're going on another adventure and you have that freedom even if it's temporary. Like when you work in a plant, and I've worked in
yeah.
facilities before, and it's like it was cool for me when I first started because I was running equipment, and so I'm like, all I have to do is go to the same place every day. Like you're not having to load the equipment on a lowboy, you're not having to find the next county road, and so I really appreciated that. But after a while, you can start feeling really stagnant because you're just going to
Oh
the
yeah.
same
And I
location
can do
every
that on the
day.
pipeline job. If it's one of them jobs that you know you're going to be in the same area for 2 or 3 months, by the end of it, I'm like, get me out of here. But I do a lot of rehab work, or haven't. This past year, I've done a lot of pipelining, but before that, I've done a lot of rehab work, and I'm going back to doing the rehab work. And so it's a lot of, you might be here for a couple, a month and a half, 5 or 6 weeks, and then you move on to a different place for 5 or 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you might be there a couple of days, which in the long run kind of stinks because you put a lot of miles on a vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
But it keeps you moving, which keeps you not so much in a dead zone.
That's true. Yeah.
There's always something new to go see.
Mhm.
Which a couple years ago I was up in the UP of Michigan, a place that my she just turned 9 year old daughter would have never got to see.
Mhm.
We didn't ever like
Yeah.
took a vacation to the UP. But I was up
Right.
there working during the summer, so it was perfect trip for her to come up there. I mean, there's a waterfall every half a mile. It's
Oh,
it's
wow.
it's beautiful country up in that part of the world. Or like she's been to Iowa. My daughter's probably seen more states than 90% of the adults in
Mhm.
America have. Just because I pipeline.
Yeah.
So it's got pluses and plenty of negatives to go with it.
Yeah, no, it does, but you've really made it your own. And when I started my podcast and I got on TikTok with it, and I started following a lot of the welders that are on there, and I mean, it made me a little nostalgic for all of it. And then I really like seeing their different. I can see a lot of their different personalities because I've been around so many welders.
Hmm.
There's a lot that I can pick up on, but everyone is unique. There's everybody's got a different style, like you said. It's like even like the welders that are a little bit more well known on TikTok, like they all have a different way of sharing their content.
Sure.
But like what you've done with your podcast, which has done really well, and you've had a lot of welders on, and you've told a lot of stories. But something that you've also been able to do recently was the showdown, the
Oh yeah,
competition in
yeah.
Arkansas.
We can talk about the welding. I've tried to get away, and I won't do this. I don't want to call it a welding competition next time.
Right.
Like I know it's a Shield Arcing Showdown. I'm going to continue. It's going to be the second annual Shield Arcing Showdown. I'm going to continue that, but I don't want to. I think it got some negative parts of it because I mean it was the first time I ever put on anything like this,
Yeah.
and I was fortunate to be able to do it. But some people didn't want to be part of it because they thought it was just strictly about the welding competition, which that was a small little tad pit. That was 45 minutes of we was there for 2 days. It was 20 hours we was on that campus from sun up to sundown, and the welding competition was 45 minutes of it, or the exposition, we'll call it that. But people don't understand. Another thing that people didn't understand is why I picked the welders that I picked. Well, I picked them because they all have brands that are already built. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to build something, you don't build it with Joe Blow, which I know plenty of Joe Blows that are really great welders that
Mm-hmm.
it'll make a heck of a competition. But or what I'm trying to get away from that, but for this sake, a competition.
Sure.
And so, but they spent hours upon hours. I mean, we had a 2.5 hour almost question and answer with them guys where they just stood up there. I let the 798 organizer and the business agent be up there with them and just asked, let these kids. We passed the microphones around to the kids like an interview at a football or press conference or whatever, and let them ask the questions they wanted to ask. And them kids ask about money, they ask about campers, they ask all sorts of questions to these guys, and it was good. Why they got on the pipeline? Like for Joel, he used to work in the plants a lot, and then he swapped to the pipeline. He says he don't want to go back to the plant.
Mm-hmm.
And they got to answer all these questions. And then we went outside, and they stood around their welding trucks, and there was some 798 guys there. Their trucks were obviously different from non-union guys. And so they got to ask questions why their truck was that way and why the truck was this way and why they done this and why they do that. And we had X-ray trucks there, and I was surprised that the kids really kind of gravitated to the X-ray truck. They wanted to get in there, and
Oh, okay, that's
Cody
cool.
Prime brought a lot of film and Protec. Oh, shout him out, Protec
Yeah, absolutely.
NDT. Well, he brought a lot of film and stuff there for the kids to see and let them go in the truck, and it was really cool. Go in the dark room and
Yeah, that is
get an
cool.
understanding about how an X-ray works.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a lot more than just the welding part of it. The welding part of it was great, and we broke straps, and the kids wanted to see. They wanted to be over there seeing their straps or the bent straps. I don't know where they ended up at, but they went on the table. I think some of them stole them, but they. Overall, I think it was a really good experience for the kids, and shout out to T-Bird and Arkansas Elite, which I'm wearing their hoodie, for letting me do it there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what it's going to hold in the future. I may try to do a biannual and try to bounce to a different welding school.
Because that was the kind of the point of it, was to participate with Arkansas Elite Welding Academy and help this next generation
Right.
get to see some real life welders, that they probably are following on TikTok. So that
Oh yeah.
that was a double play because I understand what you're saying. Like when you're building a brand, especially oil field, when you work together, it builds your brand just as much as their brands have been developed. But to do something like that at the welding school, they're really able to bring the industry together
Oh
to
yeah.
show like the veterans that have been doing it, where we all know that rig welding is a dying breed. And so if you don't preserve it, and if you don't have the next generation wanting to get into it or understand it or put in the time it takes
Yep.
to become a welder, then you're going to lose out on that lifestyle, that part of the industry.
And T-Bird don't put out rig welders. He puts out plant welders. Predominantly that's what they do there. But what he does more importantly, I think, after meeting a bunch of them kids, is he puts out a good young man into the world. Like they're
Oh,
very,
nice.
it is very job oriented there. They start at 7 a.m. Like it's very, it's like going to a job. Like what they have safety meetings every morning. It's very job oriented there. They're very strict on how they go about their business, and um, a lot of them kids are very professional. I was surprised because I know me at 18 years old, it was not like most of them kids. There was one of the kids I interviewed there won the welding competition back last year when he was a senior, and that kid's like he's gonna make bukus of money. When he gets his name out there, whether it winds up staying in the plants forever, if he goes to pipeline, he'll make a name for himself for sure. Like he was sharp as a whip.
Wow,
It
that's
was it was
awesome.
impressive.
Inspiring.
And there was two girls in there I interviewed. One of them was fixing to graduate, and one of them was just starting. And their process was real interesting. The how they went about it. Like they took ag, and then they decided, that one of them went and done something different, hairdressing or something. Then she decided that wasn't going to be for her, so she dropped back and went to the welding school,
Hmm.
which was pretty cool. I think that's something that is a I think it's more difficult to be a female trying to get into this than it is and be consistent. Like I spoke about Mackenzie Buzzard, I think it's a lot harder and a lot easier to ruin your name, build a name and ruin a name if you're a female in this line of work.
Yes, I agree with
Whether
that.
it's starting as a helper or whatever it is, And I had my run in with a female helper. I'm not going to say no names, but she tried to put a damper on my reputation not long ago. But obviously, too many people know me and know that I would never do the things that she was saying. But it's not good for her reputation,
No.
And I hate that for her, But
Hmm.
it's not how you should go about your business. You just do your job. It's never if you're a welder helper, it's never the person that you work for that's going to keep you busy. It's who's around and sees that you show up on time, you do a good job,
Hmm.
that will keep you busy. I say that as a helper. That's for welders too.
Yeah.
That's for everybody in the whole industry. If people see that you work and do your job without complaint, well, I complain, so I can't say that. If you if you're just consistent, like I've gotten jobs just because the weld boss knows that I'm going to show up to work every day.
Hmm.
Rain, snow, or shine, hungover, he knows I'm going to be there.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, well, and I think that like kind of once you get into certain circles and they know they can depend on you, like you said, but I've seen it where it's like you hear certain welders coming and you know what you're gonna get from that. Whether like this guy, parties and he's up all night, but then he's sleeping in his truck. He's gonna be ready to go at 7 a.m. the next day, and you're cool with that. It's just like that's who they are. Like this is a couple. It's a husband and wife. Like I know
Yep.
that's something that's really popular in the industry. So it's like you carry a helper.
Yep.
So, if you need so many welders and helpers on a job, like, and that, there's a couple, so it's like you got that knocked out. You don't have to
Right.
worry
Mm-hmm.
about getting this guy a helper because, I
Right.
mean, one thing that welders will bitch about is, well, I mean, there's a few things, but one of them would be your helper. Like, if you don't like your helper, or they're not a good helper, it's like you're going to be complain. You are going to complain about that with
Sure.
good reason because you need that person to carry their weight so that you can do your job. But that it can, especially with being female, you get one female, on a crew, and that can be,
Changes the whole
it changes everything. The
quickly.
liability, the tone.
Mm-hmm.
It's just different. And then welders are competitive, so I could see where with the showdown that the focus kept going back to the competition
Right.
because welders are competitive. So it's like, who's going to be the slickest and the quickest? And I
We
was,
established that.
and I was curious, how did you guys determine that?
Okay, so I had Taos from T&M Welding Supply. Shout out to Taos and Miss Mary. I had them. I had Big Cody, um, Chad Pollard, Will Hill, and there was one more. Oh, then I let a student, a select student from the picked randomly from the school, be a judge.
Oh, that's cool.
So only two people knew that. Well, only one person knew the numbers. Actually, I give everybody a number. We had 7 welders. I give everybody a number. We put it in a hat. I had a student draw. Everybody got random numbers. Only Reed from Arkansas Elite knew the numbers. So, like that way we could keep it fair. And I left 2 inspectors off by themselves, and then I done the quickest with just Will and I don't remember who done it. Will and somebody done it. Well, they done the quickest. Started the timer. Boom. We established that, and then the slickest. I got all the judges to look. We took their coupons away periodically. Nobody knew the numbers. Got all the judges to look at it, and then they cut their straps, and then we done best overall with all the judges. But they didn't know the numbers, so or who was who. So it kept it fair and honest. And so like obviously, we know Nate won the slickest. Joel got best overall, and Chase McAnally, maybe on chat. I think it's Chase McAnally from the 798 got the quickest, and he probably could have almost got the slickest too. He had a little spot that cost him, from what I gathered. But and then there's always going to be backlash. So people say this and that. Well, I didn't have any part of any of the judging. I was off over here doing 9 million other things.
Right.
And like T-Bird, he competed in the welding competition to fill a spot I needed, which we didn't talk to him until first thing that morning. We hadn't welded downhill in 2 years or something like that. So,
It's
but he
good
put
that
on
he
a good
jumped in
competition.
there, though. That's
Yeah,
cool.
and the kids loved it.
Yeah, I bet that was cool.
I think there was like 85 or 90 maybe student alumni there that morning. Not counting, I didn't really get a count on the people that just the random people that come in, but the turnout was good for the location and how. I mean, it's right. It was right before Thanksgiving, but that's the only time I could get them because duck season was coming. So I could have waited. I guess I could have waited till January and done it, but I tried to catch a time when I knew people would be in that area, or at least crossing through, maybe going home or whatnot. And I wanted to build something with Arkansas Elite because I believe in what T Bird and his staff are doing over there. They run a tight ship, very very professional. If I had a welding school, it would not be like that.
Wow.
But
That's cool. It's really inspiring. And you said that, I mean, he focuses on plant welders, but in my experience, I think that starting in the plant, you're going to learn a lot more, and that pipeline is something that like, you kind of get to build up to.
oh yeah, 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 for sure. It's I think that if you can uphill weld, learning the downhill weld is not that difficult.
Right.
Honestly,
Yeah.
it's just how fast can you do it and how can you keep the quality there when you're moving that fast. That's the big thing, because a plant is they probably 30% X-ray most of the time. Well, natural gas pipeline's 100%. Start to finish, you're judged from the day that you test to the day you leave there,
Right.
and that's what gets people. It gets some people, and then some people just works out for
Right.
you. And I think that's the biggest transition is that the quality. I'm not saying I can't say that. The standard that you're held to with the natural gas line compared to a water line in a plant or I don't know, an acid line in a plant is way different.
Oh, yeah.
And it's because I understand that if an acid line leaks in a plant, it's an issue. But you're talking about a small containment. If a natural gas line blows up, you're talking about a
Right.
pretty good area.
Yeah.
If a 36-inch 500 wall gas line blew up, it's about to be a pretty big issue. That's national news quickly.
Extreme. Yeah, definite.
And that gives our I don't know if I want to say that. Other people, it gives them a right to complain about where we put natural gas lines
Yeah,
at.
no, and it's understandable because if a natural gas line blows and it's a 100-mile line, you're talking about potential 100 miles of destruction.
And people out of, if it was wintertime, say the Northeast, people freezing to death,
Hmm.
because all them apartments got them boilers in it.
Right.
Well, that gas comes from Texas or Canada or wherever, and if you cut them off, then it would be devastating,
Hmm.
and a lot of people that way don't
Yeah.
think about that.
No, you don't. But I have seen some pipeline welders try and work in a plant, and they don't make it.
Oh yeah.
It's just it's apples and oranges. It's a different
Hmm.
animal, because it's like trying to weld uphill and you don't know how, and you're trying to fake it till you make it. You really can't. I mean, some can if you're a real slick welder, but I've seen some guys struggle like because all they've ever done is
It's
weld on
downhill.
this green pipe,
Hmm.
and it's the same process every time. It's
Yep.
it's this it's the same speed. Of course you're moving pretty fast, but to fabricate, to be able to cut and measure and build and read ISOs, like it's a totally different process.
I don't consider myself to just be a pipeliner like Nate, in one, and most of the guys I know, now I do know some strictly pipeliners,
Hmm.
but most of the guys that I know are what we consider to be a rig welder because they can go to a fab job and they can pull their own measurements. But we don't have fitters; we have helpers to help us fit.
Right.
Where in a plant, you most time have fitters to
Hmm.
to do a lot of the stuff for you. So, they can go pipeline. They can. I was talking to a buddy of mine a while ago. He's like, I don't want to weld no 7018 this year, but because I'm
Yeah.
going back to do a rehab job, which is
Hmm.
predominantly 7018, but that's welding on live lines. So it's a
Right.
whole nother standard of what you're held to do that process,
Hmm.
which I like it because the reasons I said earlier. But I don't like the 7018 part of it because it's a slow process
Hmm.
compared to downhill welding
Right.
or running, 8010 pipeliner rod. But I think in a plant, like I got kicked out of a plant one time because I just wanted to work. Like I wanted to weld, and they're like, "Yeah, just hang out." And I'm like, I can't just hang out. I want to be doing something because I'm used to doing something.
Hmm.
And so I just gave it up. It was fun for the 4 weeks I did it, but
Yeah.
I was happy to go back pipelining, or
Sure.
what I call pipeline. And it was a fab job I went back to, but it's still fab for the pipeline.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. Welding launchers and receivers. Yeah.
risers and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's fun. That's
Yeah,
fun fab work.
steady work.
Yeah.
I used to like to build compressor stations. All I wanted to do. Like
I
that.
enjoy working in a compressor
There's a
station.
lot of people that don't like to roll out 2 inch or weld 2 inch.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
I love to weld 2 inch.
Do
Don't
you
bother me
just
because
put
it
it on
takes
your
7 minutes.
rollout wheel and
7 minutes.
yeah.
Kick it in the dirt.
Yeah.
On to the next one.
Hmm.
It's easy, and then you're steadily moving all day
Yeah.
long. If you get on,
Yeah.
I would say that I don't care to weld anything over 20 inch, and if you're not gonna brother-in-law it, then I don't want to weld it.
For sure.
Because that's driving a little too hard, especially. I'll throw this out there real quick: is the wages for us these days are making wages from 2007, and it's or the early 2000s is ridiculous. And I'm probably going to get the shout out for being a 798 welder again for this, but it's just I am not, but it's not that hard to see that I'm driving $100,000 truck and I'm getting paid $15 an hour for it. The math don't math, and then
Hmm.
I got $700 worth in insurance a month and diesel on top of that. It's just you're breaking even these days
Hmm.
in the pipeline. You're not getting rich like they was. They used to be able to buy a truck. 2 months of wages they could buy a truck.
Hmm.
You can't do that anymore. It's impossible,
Right.
especially if you got two households to deal with. Or a lot of stipulations in it. But if we don't band together, that's why the rig welder's going away. Because you can't make no money at it anymore.
Hmm.
It's either, for most of us, it's just in our blood. And it's all we know how to do,
Yeah.
so we can't stop. But
Yeah.
we're not making a great living at it anymore. It's it's something going to have to change about it because it's going to in the next 5 or 6 years they ain't gonna be able to afford to do it. I mean,
Well, and it's appreciating the quality, 'cause there's so many guys that'll put a welding machine in the back of their truck and want to be a welder, but there's companies in West Texas that want to get the cheapest, so they don't care about the quality if it can pass X-ray or we'll just get some
They
guys
want
on
to
the
get
line.
the cheapest because the gas company want to do it cheap as possible,
Yeah.
which makes the contractor drop their price, which
Mm-hmm.
makes the only people that suffer out of the whole deal is the hands that do all the work anyways.
Yeah.
And I know that's another union sounding quote, but it's a fact. It's not a rocket scientist to see who's getting the shaft in the whole deal.
Yeah.
You know,
It's always the guys at the
and
bottom.
you're held to the highest standard. A pipeline welder is held to the highest standard, which they're the most money on the job. They cost
Yeah.
more than anybody else, but they're held to the highest standard out of everybody on the job.
Mm-hmm.
So they should get paid more than anybody else out there.
Right.
A superintendent should make helper wages for a couple weeks, and a welder should get their paycheck because they make
Mm-hmm.
they can either break or make a superintendent,
Yeah.
or a company,
Yeah.
and all it would take is welders. There's more non-union welders by far than there are union welders. So they all just said, "Oh, we're not going to work for that. We'd eventually get paid."
Right.
Because I don't care. Everybody says West Texas, the illegals and all this stuff. They're not going to outrank all of us together, and most of them don't want to work for the wages either,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because they're trying to give their families in Mexico the best life they can. So you would think they'd want to work for the most money they could.
Well, but I think that sometimes there are compromises that have to be made circumstantially, or maybe they're job scared. A lot of
Oh
people
yeah.
will do things if they're job scared.
If you're job scared, you're in the wrong industry.
Well, it's tough though, because when you're just trying to make it and you don't have a lot of choices. And I mean, you can go to work in the oil field, no degree, no high school diploma, nothing.
Sure.
But if you go to work for the wrong company and they take advantage of your legal status or
Mm-hmm.
your position, and you don't know anybody, and maybe your biggest struggle is the language barrier,
Sure.
you're getting the bottom of the barrel. And then
Sure.
there's companies that
And
will
the worst
take
working conditions too.
the worst working conditions, and I've seen all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And you're treated as such. You're lucky you're here, you're lucky you have a job.
Sure.
And so when you have that mentality and you have so many companies that are going to take advantage of it, that's part of what brings the quality down,
Oh yeah.
because you've got desperate people, and then you've that are working for greedy people.
For sure.
And so then
100%.
you guys, like the quality rig welders that should be getting paid your fair wage, you do suffer on your level because you've got these opposing forces.
But I'm not saying that everybody would have to get on to the train of doing the right thing, but if just the quality welders that have the reputation, whether you work for blank or blank or blank, if you just said we're not going to work for that no more, they couldn't recover from it without paying you.
Sure.
That's all it would take. I'm not saying every single welder in West Texas had to be like, I'm not going to work today. I'm just saying the quality, or the first tier of welders, just say we're not going to work for them wages, and it would change pretty rapidly, because the gas company is still going to want the same quality they was getting, and you're not going to get it with guys that's been broke out for 6 months.
Right.
As versus guys that's been welding for. It takes 5 years to be a well-rounded rig welder, and so if you just said the guys that's been welding, even if you said 3.5 years, just said we're not going to work for them wages, it would change overnight. I mean, I think a lot of people are, I'm just going to say about it, they're just ignorant to the situation. And I'm not saying that the union's right or non-union's right, because I just want to make the most money. I got into this, make the most money I could for my kids, I don't care about the health insurance and all that. None of that stuff affects me. But I just want to make the most money I can. If I'm going to, you're giving yourself to something. You get broke down, I don't know. There's a million broke down welders, whether you're in a plant or on a pipeline. They get bad lungs, bad eyes, So if you're going to give all this, why not get paid the most money? So we can have the big houses and the big fancy trucks and the big campers and all the toys at home, like they did, for the past 10 years.
Right.
Why can't we have all that stuff?
Sure.
We can't now because we're breaking even because of our truck notes, and our camper notes and all this stuff. And we're not getting I can ramble about this, but
Yeah.
you're just
Well,
not
I
getting
know
paid.
it's an ongoing battle, but I do want to ask, how do you feel about this year, 2025, and where we're at? Like, do you think it's going to be a good year for pipeline welders?
Yeah, but I don't consider it been a bad year for good welders. The past 4 years hadn't been bad. I mean, if we're putting the tiers, if you're a top tier welder, I've worked as much as I wanted to work for the past 4 years. I've made a lot of money with with who's been in office. Try to keep the politics out of it. But we also know coming into this that permits are fixing to be flying off the office desks. It's the approval rating's fixing to go back up. Like they're fixing to start some massive projects that's been on hold for the past 4 years, you know? And so, yeah, I think, and they're going to drill like it's nobody's
So,
business.
okay, kind of to your point on that, there's going to be plenty of work, but the wages are still not where they need to be.
Yeah, they're going to stay the same because people are going to go to work. And,
Mm-hmm.
the big oil and gas companies are going to sit here and laugh about it because their CFOs and CEOs are getting rich and all. It's just part of it. It's the guy that even their hands that work in their facilities ain't getting paid what they should get paid.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? It don't take a rocket scientist to know what oil companies make in a day. It's public knowledge.
Sure.
Look it up, and then look up at one of the big pipeline companies. Look up what the guy that runs the company gets paid. He ain't doing no work. All he did was hire the guys to do the work.
Right.
Look at what they get paid, and then go drop all the way down to look at a labor hand what he gets paid.
Mm-hmm.
Or a swamper or a helper. I don't like to go to a job to where they pay the welding truck 17 and they pay a helper $14 an hour. I don't like that. I mean, my weld machine's a tool. That helper is one of my tools too. I like them to make the same money.
That's
And then a
interesting.
welder to get paid 120 and a helper to get paid 80 on per diem.
Mm-hmm.
It costs that guy just as much to be away from home as it does me.
Sure.
So we should both make the same money. Because I guarantee you that the contractor's getting 150 for both of a piece.
Right.
So why can't they just match it and still take their $30 or whatever?
Yeah.
It's just if people would just open their eyes, it would be great for all of us. Like,
Yeah.
I can ramble about it. I'm not gonna ramble about it because people are just they'll automatically label me. They'll be like, oh, he's a 798 guy. But I am not. Have no
No,
business. I've talked plenty of
think
mess.
no, you're just demystifying it, and like you're talking
Yeah.
about. I mean, because these are struggles that all welders deal
Are
with.
facing.
And I mean, it's a really great thing that you have your podcast where you guys can talk all of this out and keep hashing it out and keep the conversation going, because it is something that needs to be continuously addressed, because no one's just going to suddenly decide to give you guys more money. It definitely needs to be an industry wide focus, that all of the workers, the skilled tradesmen and women that are in the industry, need to be paid for their time away from home, the tools they invest, the skill that they've built up. And it's not the same as someone that just walks on the job, or like you're saying, someone that doesn't have any experience or making more or the same as you. And so,
Well, you can go be a pipeline welding inspector and make more than a welder and never even know how to weld.
yeah,
And I don't agree with
I
that.
definitely have seen that, and that's something like, I think that if you're going to be a CWI, you should have welding experience. It makes no sense to me that you wouldn't.
You should be a pipeliner for 5 years and I'll
A
be able to
pipeliner for sure.
prove it
Yeah.
every day. Not just Uncle Jerry said that he did it. It
Right.
needs to be like video evidence, or at least have a set of papers. There's
Right.
something to prove, that you welded for 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because how can you tell me how to do my job if you don't know how to do it? I don't like superintendents for that very same reason. Unless they was a welder that I knew that they was a welder, I don't like them. I work for weld bosses. I go to work for somebody that has the same credentials I have to be able to do that job. Now, some of them's better than others. Some of them are just got that spot because of the people they know.
Oh yeah.
And some of them are really great. I can ramble about that too. So.
Well, I appreciate all of your insight, Ty.
Yeah.
I really do, and I love what you're doing. It's been a lot of fun to watch, and I look forward to seeing what you do in the future.
So I appreciate you. And you can find me on all major platforms. It's Out on the Road Podcast. That's YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Instagram. It's where I drop most of my updates at. I have a TikTok that I don't use very seldomly, but it's Out on the Road Podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody needs to check it out. It's really awesome. There's a lot of great insight about pipeline and welding and just being in the industry. So thank you again for coming on the show today, Ty.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for watching Power of the Permian. We'll see you next time. Awesome.